Hello, hello, guys. What's up? So, it has been a while since I have pre recorded my lectures for so long. Anyway, for today, we're going to talk about fixation until clearing. So, this is under the histopathology section. Now, I do hope that you're ready to learn. Okay, so let me just set up the things that I need to do here. Okay. So again, good morning, good day, good evening to all of you listening. So let's start, okay? Now for our fixation, before we proceed to our fixation, we have this thing called pre-analytical factors in tissue processing, right? Okay. As what you have learned in your what do you call this? Third year, if you can recall that there are a lot of like we have factors in our pre-analytical phase, our analytical, and our post-analytical phase. Now, histopathology actually. Wala pud siya wala siya na miss out ani, okay, so histopathology also have pre-analytical factors. Now, what are these pre-analytical factors that you should know of? Now, number one, we have what we call your warm ischemia. Warm ischemia, it talks about, this is a term used for when the tissue. Now, okay, warm ischemia is a term used a tissue, when a tissue's blood supply is cut off. Okay, so that is what we call your warm ischemia. Basically, um, your tissue here suffers because of lack of blood supply. Now, another pre-analytical factor, we have what we call your cold ischemia. Now, your cold ischemia is somewhat different, okay? It also lacks oxygen, but this one, the tissue sample is removed from the patient's body, okay? Now, again, this one, it is also a lack of blood supply, but then again, this one, the tissue sample is removed, okay, from the patient's body. Now, another pre-analytical factor we have here is what we call your fixation time. Okay, so basically, our fixation time, um, this is the time when the tissue or will arrive in our laboratory. Basically, the time it takes for the tissue to travel from the patient's body, like from getting it out from the patient's body until it arrives in the laboratory where we can fix it, do our tissue accessioning, all of that stuff. Now, um, basically the rule of thumb for our fixation time is that the earlier the tissue is fixed, the better its its preservation. Okay, so basically sakto man pod kay kuan mas daghan tang ma-preserve if ma-early nato og fix ang ato ang um tissue. Okay? Now, that's basically for the pre-analytical factors. Now, moving on, magchika na jud ta about our fixation. Okay? Now, the first step, right? It is during our uh, pre-test. It is the first and most critical step, right, in histotech. Now, again, it's not your labeling kay 'di ba, we already established that in our histotechniques na murag mnemonic, labeling is at the end of the step, right? So fixation na just una, kinaunhan jud siya. Okay? Now, its definition is the killing, penetration, and hardening of tissues. Now, that is its classical definition. Now, we have a, what do you call this? Modified, pero it's basically the same, pero naalang siya yung mga alterations, right? So, it's um, it's currently okay, it's currently defined as the alteration of tissues. How do you alter the tissues? By stabilizing proteins so that the tissues become resistant to further changes. Okay, so example of further changes, we have degeneration, decomposition, putrefaction. We also have tissue distortion, right? So again, it is the alteration of the tissue by stabilizing proteins. Okay, we have to stabilize the proteins so that the tissues become resistant to further changes, further damage, so on and so forth. Now, we have we have different goals of fixation, right? So, naatay primary, naaputay secondary goal. Now, our primary goal for fixation is that it is to preserve the morphologic and chemical integrity of the cell in as lifelike manner as possible. Again, it is to preserve the morphologic and chemical integrity of the cell in as lifelike manner as possible. Now, again, dapat pud we must emphasize this lifelike manner kay we have to make the tissues kanang murar siya wala pagikuha sa body ba so that we can still know or we can still derive a correct diagnosis for it. Now, our secondary goal, it is to harden and protect tissue from trauma of further handling. Okay, so our secondary goal for our fixation it is to harden and protect the tissue from trauma of further handling. Okay, so sana all wala na trauma, sana all gi-protect. O di ba? So ganun. So again, the most important thing here is that basically we just have to stabilize the proteins so that we can um, we can proceed to the different steps, right? Kay kung ano naman, na-preserve naman nato ang dapat natong i-preserve, and then we had also hardened and protected na the tissue so that dili na siya what do you call this? Dili na siya madaot towards the succeeding steps, right? So napatay katong dehydration and all. Now, um, with our fixation, we have what we call the actions of a good fixative. Diba? Actions of a good fixative. Now, what are these actions? We have three actually. So the first one, it is to preserve the tissue. Next is to prevent the breakdown of cellular elements. And then the third one, we have to coagulate or precipitate protoplasmic substances. Now, again, these three are the actions of a good fixative mo na dapat natong lantawon, okay? If it will preserve the tissue, very good. If it prevents the breakdown of cellular elements, okay, again, we have to preserve it in as lifelike manner as possible. It is also an action of a good fixative. It is to coagulate or precipitate protoplasmic substances. Now, we already discussed, diba, previously, the different factors that either enhance or retard the rate of fixation. And I would also like to remind you that, again, the rate of penetration for our formalin is again at 1 millimeter per hour. Okay. Now, before another one um that you should know is that, 'di ba, daghan man tang fixatives, right? Like, we have a lot of different categories for our fixatives. Now, we have what we call the two basic mechanisms involved in fixation. So, I think you're familiar na, ani. So we have two basic mechanisms involved in fixation. So, uh, number one, we have additive fixation. So, familiar, additive, from the word itself, add. So, this one, the chemical constituent of the fixative is taken in and becomes, take note, becomes a part of the tissue. Another one is your non-additive fixation. Your non-additive fixation, this one, the fixing agent is not taken up but by the tissue. Instead, it it alters the tissue. It alters first the tissue composition, thus stabilizing the tissue, which makes them unsuitable for bacterial decomposition. Now, basically, ang dapat ninyong hunaon ani if medyo nalibog mo is that, the first one, additive, like, when you have a partner, right? And then, namoy ka chat-chat, and then kana when that person sees your flaws, your imperfections, um that person still accepts you as who you are and who you will become. Oh, di ba? Charot. That is for your additive fixation. Kaya again, the fixative here is taken in and becomes a part of the tissue, becomes a part of your world. Oh, di ba? Now, next, we have your non-additive fixation. Now, kanisha, medyo na siya standard. Na siya standard. So, basically, this partner of yours, he or she will change you, will change you first, like, I don't know, for the good or for the better, pero i-change sa kaniya o sa kaniya i-accept, okay? Usa pa ma stable ang inyuhang relationship. Charot, o di ba? So I hope that that helps you in, what do you call this, in differentiating the two mechanisms. Again, we have additive and a non-additive fixation. Okay. Okay, moving on. Now let's proceed lang sa ato ang decalcification. Now again, decalcification, it's not a routine step, right? It's not routinely performed in our histotechnology. Now, we only need to perform decalcification if the tissue has lime salts or calcium salts in it. Okay. Now, example of these tissues, we have our bones, our teeth, we have calcified tissues. Okay, now take note, the calcification should be done after fixation, right? After fixation and before impregnation to ensure and facilitate normal cutting of the sections. Now, take note, guys, um, we first have to decalcify, we first have to fix our tissue before decalcifying it. Okay, again, we go back to the main goal um, of our fixation. Again, it is to preserve the morphologic and chemical integrity of the cell. Now, if ato siyang i-decalcify una, murag, what's the point, right? So, wala na tayo ma-preserve after decalcifying kay wala ta kabalo some of those um, constituents like the cell of it kay na interfere na sa ato ang decalcifying agent, or like we don't know, right? So for us to be sure, we have to do first our fixation before doing anything else. Okay, now we also have different factors that influence the rate of fixation, the rate of decalcification. We have concentration of the decalcifying agent. We also have the ratio of the decalcifying fluid to the tissue. We also have the temperature, so it can either be a high or a low temperature. Mechanical agitation is also considered a factor. Kaya again, agitation, right? Presence of agitation, it speeds up the process. Now, the last one is the ideal time required. Now, for our decalcification, guys, we have different types of uh, decal decalcifying agents. We have different types of decalcifying agents. We have, if familiar na mo, wait lang, nawala na ako ang agents. Okay, I joke. Teka lang guys, nalibog na ho. Okay, ngano daghan na siyang layo kayo, pero kamo na mo adjust ana guys. So, different types of decalcifying agents. We have acid decalcifying agents. Next, we have chelating agents, acid chelating agents. We have ion exchange resins, ion exchange. O, di ba? Dugay kay ko makatype. Pasensya na. Resins. And then the last one we have electrophoresis, or also known as electrical ionization. Okay, now, um, now for our different types of decalcifying agents, guys, I want you to ganan ko ipaila-ila ninyo ato ang acid decal agents. So number one on the list, we have uh, 5 to 10% nitric acid. Now, 10% nitric acid, it is considered as the most common and fastest decal agent, and it's also recommended for routine purposes. Okay, for routine purposes. Now, another one na ako ang ipaila-ila ninyo is your hydrochloric acid, which by now you are all familiar with, 'di ba? An example of your hydrochloric acid is your von Ebner solution, and uh, von Ebner solution is composed of your sodium chloride, your hydrochloric acid, and your distilled water. Now, one thing that is unique about our hydrochloric acid, is that it is recommended for, take note, for surface decalcification, okay, of the tissue block. Okay. Now, again, guys, hydrochloric acid, it is only for the surface decalcification of the tissue block. Mo na siya naka unique or special ana niya. Now, another one, akong ipaila-ila ninyo, who else is your naunsa na dyan, trichloroacetic acid. Your trichloroacetic acid, it is a weak decal agent. It is a weak decal agent. Its decalcification time is from 4 to 8 days. 'Di ba? Medyo dugay-dugay jud siya. Now that's for your acid decalcifying agents. Now another type of decal agent is your chelating agents. We have two kinds of our chelating agents. We have Edta. So I think you're familiar with this, katong inyuhang purple top. Uh, Edta, or also known as your Versine. Take note, guys, your Edta, it is pH sensitive. Now, when we say pH sensitive, again, um, different ang iyang, it is dependent on whether or not the pH is optimum for it to work or not. Okay. Now, when we say chelating, oh, now when we say EDTA, it is pH sensitive, meaning ang iyahang, uh, it usually works at a pH of 7 to 7.4. Okay, pH of 7 to 7.4 is it is the usual pH for our EDTA. Now, nganong dili man lower, ma'am, nganong dili man acidic, right? Kay nagusiyahang koan. Um, when we use it at a pH of 3, actually there is no binding of our calcium ions if pH 3. Now, um, pero if higher pod sa 7 to 7.4, like for example, pH of 8, uh, actually it is the optimal pH for our calcium binding. But then again, the what they call this, the disadvantage for this one is that alkaline sensitive linkages will be destroyed. Okay, so alkaline linkages or alkaline sensitive linkages in our tissue will be destroyed if we have our EDTA at a pH of 8. So again, ang kuan lang gyud aning sa EDTA nato, it is within 7 to 7.4. Okay, now another one, EDTA. EDTA is considered a slow decalcifying agent. Slow decal agent. It is a slow decal agent, and ang iyahang decalcification time actually is around 1 to 3 days. Days ba? Actually, 1 to 3 weeks. So dugay-dugay jud siya. Another example I would just like to say is your Cal-X, your Col-X, o di ba? Gatawag-tawag pa Japon mo sa inyong ex, charot. Your Cal-X is another example of your chelating agent. Now, so far, ang ako lang maingon ni Cal-X is that it is also a somewhat slow decal agent. I don't know the time it takes for it, pero kana siya. Okay, now another one, moving on, is your ion exchange resins. Now, your ion exchange resins, um, the decalcifying agent for this one is usually 20 to 30 times the volume of the tissue. Now for your electrical ionization or your electrophoresis, it is basically electrophoresis, guys. It is a process whereby calcium ions, okay, di ba positive charge man ato ang calcium ions. These ions are attracted to a negative electrode, and the and is removed from the decalcifying solution. So basically, guys, our electrophoresis, it is ideal, or it is satisfactory for small bone fragments. Okay, for small bone fragments. And then electrophoresis, of course, it uses electricity. And then its solution, okay, na siya'y iyahang electrolytic decalcification na solution. It is composed of, solution is composed of 88% formic acid. We have concentrated HCl and distilled water. So that is its composition. Again, 88% formic, concentrated HCl, and distilled water. Okay. Now, moving on. Another thing that you should take note under decalcification is that we have different ways to measure the extent of decalcification. So, one way to measure the extent of decal is or your physical test or your mechanical test. Your physical test, again, it is obsolete. It's not anymore done. This is basically done by touching or bending. You know, kanang toothpick, di ba? Like, itusok-tusok lang, pero maupod lagi na na. It's not reliable at all. Okay? It is inaccurate, and then it may also um, kanang mga small na mga calcified na mga tissues, like those tiny very tiny particles will not be detected if ever. Now another one is your chemical method. Okay, your chemical method or your chemical test, it in the form of your calcium oxalate test. Now, your calcium oxalate test, guys, it is a chemical test performed on your discarded tissue, or your your discarded fluid. Okay. Now, um, this one, your calcium oxalate, it it's regarded as simple, reliable, convenient, and recommended for routine decalcification. Okay. Now, the last one, we have your X-ray or your radiological method. Take note, guys, your X-ray or your radiological method, um, expensive siya. It's expensive. Okay? That's more na siya ang only disadvantage niya. Pero take note, dagan siyang most reliable siya. Most reliable and most ideal. Pero maupod lagi na most expensive pud siya among the three tests, or among the three options. Okay? So again, physical test obsolete, not anymore performed in the lab. We have chemical method in the form of the calcium oxalate test. The last one is your X-ray or radiological method. Again, siyang most reliable, most ideal, but the most expensive. Okay? Okay, moving on, we have our dehydration. Now, dehydration, guys, it is the process of removing your intracellular water, your intracellular fluid from the tissue. Okay, so that we so that ma-prepare ato ang tissue for wax impregnation. Take note, guys, dehydration usually occurs when we place it in an ascending grades of alcohol. That's for dehydration. Again, rehydration kay descending. So ascending grades, we have 70, 80, and then your 95. Okay? Muna siya ascending. Descending kay bali, okay? 95, 80, 70. Okay. Now, um, we have different types, right? Again, ano pa tayo mga types? Oh, wait lang. We have the different types of dehydrating agent. Now, some of these, kay ako anang nachika ninyo. So, under this one, we have, kuan lang sa alcohols lang sa ato ang chikahan, alcohol. Now, alcohol, guys, another prime example is your ethyl alcohol, your ethanol. Ethyl alcohol, it is the most commonly used dehydrating agent, dehydrating agent among the alcohols. Okay? Now, it is also considered as the best, the best dehydrating agent. Okay, the best dehydrating agent goes to ethyl alcohol because paspasiya. Okay, it is fast acting. It mixes with water and many organic solvents, and it's not expensive. It's not expensive. It's not poisonous. So meaning it is safe for the handler to use. Okay. Now, another one is your methyl alcohol. So, di ba, nakachika naman tayo ni methyl alcohol. It is toxic. It is a toxic dehydrating agent. Now, it is primarily used for blood and tissue films, okay? And for your smear preparation. Another one is your alcohol. Isopropyl alcohol, 'di ba? As what we've said, it is a versatile ethanol substitute. Okay, when ethyl alcohol um, is not available, we use isopropyl instead. Now, another characteristic aning isopropyl, it is for your microwave processing techniques or processing schedules. Okay. Now, moving on, we have your butanol or your butyl alcohol. Butyl alcohol, it's primarily for plant and animal micro techniques. And kuan pud siya, guys, it's a slow dehydrating agent. Now, another one kay naabot tay pentanol o denatured alcohol pero I will not go into specifics kay wala lay notable characters ani nila. Now, another type of dehydrating agent, we have what we call your tetrahydrofuran, tetrahydrofuran, your THF. Okay, it's basically it dehydrates and clears tissues at the same time. Okay? So it is your THF. It is a dehydrating and a clearing agent at the same time. Okay? Now, basically, maulang sa anay ato ang chika about dehydration. Okay, let's move on na sa another step of our histo techniques. It's your clearing. Now, clearing, guys, it's also known as what is the answer? It is known as your dealcoholization. Okay, it's also known as your dealcoholization. Take note, guys. Although there are different types of what they call this dehydrating agents, but as what you have read sa inyong book or sa activities, di ba daghan kay itang mga dehydrating agents. We have alcohols, we have acetone, we have dioxane, we have cellulose, di ba, unsa to lain, triethyl phosphate. Now, as you can see, daghan kaayo, we have different types of dehydrating agents, but the most commonly used ones are your alcohol. Okay, so basically or specifically your ethyl alcohol. Okay, again, it's not expensive, so anyone can anyone can afford it. Mao pud na siyang gitawag ra pud ang clearing as your dealcoholization, kay from the word itself, from its predecessor, 'di ba, iyang dehydrating agent, dehydration, ang usual na ginagamit is your alcohols. Now, there are two main characteristics of a good clearing agent that you should look into. The first one, it must be fully miscible. It must be fully miscible with your ethanol, okay, or your dehydrating agent. And then the second one, it must be fully miscible with paraffin wax. Okay, again, the next step of your clearing is your impregnation. So, might as well, di ba? Dapat gyud actually na it should be miscible with our paraffin wax. Okay? Now, we have basically we define clearing as the removal of your alcohol or your dehydrating fluid from the tissue, and that so that we can prepare it for the next step. Okay, now going back, 'di ba, nakachika man ko na our clearing agent should be 10 times the volume of the tissue. Now, again, moving on, we have different applications of an ideal clearing agent. Number one, it is to make the tissue, embryos, and parasites transparent. Okay? We have to make it transparent so that we can view it under the microscope. Moving on, number two, applications of an ideal clearing agent. It is the alcoholization for the de-alcoholization of tissue preparatory to wax impregnation. As what I've said, right? Next step, impregnation. The last one for de-alcoholization of stained sections prior to mounting. Kay, in our different steps in our staining techniques, naaman pud tay mga de-alcoholization, right? Naaman tay alcohols present in our staining section. 'Di ba? Naatay kuan pod, naatay rehydration and dehydration ato. Okay? Now, um, moving on, I will introduce you to three napod na clearing agents. The first one, you're already familiar with your xylene. It's also known as your xylol, right? Your xylol and then xylene. It is the most commonly used clearing agent, and it is the most rapid. Take note, pila ganito. It ranges 15 to 30 minutes iyahang clearing time. Okay? Now, one characteristic of your xylene is that it becomes milky. Okay? It becomes milky, pero mamilky ra ni siya when incomplete dehydration happens. Okay? Now, if wala na tarong ang inyuhang pag-dehydrate sa imong tissue, mamilky ang imuhang xylene. Okay? Now, how do you know if you have completely successfully dehydrated your tissue? When you take a look at your bottles, okay? Kay diba, kuan man to kabuok? Um, upat man to kabuok ka bottles. When there is presence of turbidity in those bottles, kung asa mo nag-dehydrate, meaning to say, you have successfully dehydrated your tissue. Again, it is by the presence of turbidity, okay, of your fluid. Now, moving on, um, chloroform. Basically, guys, chloroform, it is for tough tissue or for tough organs, okay? For tough tissues, and it has a serious disadvantage. What is its serious disadvantage? We take a look at the applications of a good clearing agent. So, what do you think? Okay, you have 3 seconds to answer. Naadiri applications of an ideal clearing agent. Unsa siguro ang iyang serious disadvantage? Okay, 3, 2, 1. So I hope your answer is correct. Its serious disadvantage is that the tissues are not transparent. So, mo po dyan na siya yung pinaka-first. It's the first one, first line up in the application of an ideal clearing agent. So, tissues are not transparent. So, what's the point, right? So, if we cannot see it under the microscope. Moving on, we have benzene. Now, benzene, guys, this one is a little, di ba, katong koan, second-rate copycat, the middle child, the problematic middle child. Now, our benzene, it it is rapid, okay? 'Di ba? Ato ang gikuan ani niya kay 15 to 60 minutes ang iyahang clearing time. 15 to 60 minutes, and then um it it is considered as carcinogenic. Now, its serious disadvantage, okay? Diba, we already talked about this. Its serious disadvantage is that it causes aplastic anemia. Okay, when you hear the word benzene, you always have to associate it with aplastic anemia. Okay, now what else? Di ba nakachika naman ko last time about cedarwood oil or your cedarwood oil? Di ba katong daghang letter C kay mo clear siya both paraffin and celluloidine sections. It is recommended for another letter C for your CNS, your central nervous system, and another letter C for your cytological studies. Okay. Now, this our cedarwood oil, it also becomes milky. Pero please take note, it becomes milky upon prolonged storage. Okay, upon prolonged storage, and therefore you should filter it before use. Last one, unsa pa may line? Aniline. Nakachika mo ka ng aniline, di ba? Katong clearing embryos, insects, and very delicate specimens, si aniline oil. Si clove oil, ganitong katong it becomes adulterated, right? It has the tendency to become adulterated. Okay, so I hope you still remember that. Now, let's move on na gyud sa atong impregnation. Last topic for this one. Impregnation, also known as your infiltration. Okay, please take note, infiltration. Please don't get ayaw mo kalibog, ana. Okay? Now, for your impregnation, it is, di ba, at least 25 times the volume of the tissue. Okay? Now, impregnation, it uses a medium that replaces completely all the hollow or empty cavities. Okay? Kay di ba, nakuha man nato tong intracellular water via dehydration. Now we have to stabilize the tissue um, by introducing it with our paraffin wax. Okay? Now take note guys, in our impregnation, it should be 25 times the volume of the tissue. Okay? Now what else should you know of? Yeah, basically maulang sa kana lang sa for today. So I hope you've learned something, you relearned something from the past. Okay, so again, atong mga topics na na-covered karon, we have your pre-analytical factors, fixation, decalcification, we have dehydration, clearing, and then impregnation. So thank you so much for joining me and for listening to my discussion. I hope you learned something new, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video.